I watched my banker son lean forward across the mahogany table, his voice clinical as he explained to the lawyer why his own mother needed to be declared mentally incompetent. "She's clearly lost her cognitive abilities," he said, gesturing at the fake financial documents I'd planted. What he didn't know was that I was recording every word from the next room, and that my supposed $4 million loss was the most profitable investment I'd ever made, because it showed me exactly who my children really were. My name is Eleanor Thompson, and at 59 years old, I thought I had life figured out. My husband, Robert, had been gone for 8 months, leaving me with a pristine suburban home that echoed with memories and a bank account that held $4 million. $4 million. The number still felt foreign rolling around in my mind, like wearing shoes that belonged to someone else. I spent most mornings sitting in Robert's old leather chair surrounded by financial documents that seemed to multiply overnight. Investment portfolios, insurance policies, tax forms that looked like they were written in ancient Greek. The papers covered every surface of our dining room table, creating a maze of numbers and legal jargon that made my head spin. But here's what really got under my skin. My 3 adult children had suddenly decided I was fragile. Marcus, my eldest at 35, worked as a banker downtown. Expensive suits, perfect haircut. The kind of man who measured success in quarterly reports. Diana, 33, had climbed her way up to senior partner at a corporate law firm. She spoke in contracts and contingencies, treating every conversation like a business negotiation. Then there was Jake, my baby at 28, still chasing his dreams with a paintbrush and living in a studio apartment that barely fit a bed. The shift in their behavior started subtle. Marcus would call twice a week instead of twice a month, always asking about my financial situation. Diana began dropping by unannounced, her sharp eyes scanning the house like she was conducting an inventory. Even their language changed. Instead of asking what I wanted to do, they'd suggest what I should do. "Mom, are you sure you want to handle all this yourself?" Marcus would say, gesturing at my paperwork like it was radioactive waste. "Maybe we should find you a financial advisor," Diana would add, her tone the same one she'd used when I was learning to drive at 16. The breaking point came during what should have been a pleasant family dinner. I'd made Robert's famous lasagna recipe, set the good china, even bought flowers for the table. My children sat around the dining room, where I'd served them thousands of meals over the years. That's when I heard it. Marcus and Diana had retreated to the kitchen, supposedly to help with dessert, but their voices carried, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "She's clearly struggling with the basics," Marcus whispered, his banker, voice clinical and detached. "Did you see how confused she looked when we mentioned the tax implications?" Diana's response hit even harder. "I've been researching the legal options. There are ways to ensure she gets proper guidance before she makes any major mistakes." They were talking about me like I was a child who'd wandered into traffic. But wait, it gets worse. Jake tried to defend me. "Mom seems fine to me. Maybe you two should back off and let her figure things out." The dismissive laugh Diana gave could have frozen water. "Jake, you barely manage your own finances. This is adult conversation about serious money." Marcus jumped in immediately. "She needs professional management, not emotional support. We're talking about preserving the family's future here." The family's future, not my future. Theirs. I stood in that hallway, holding a tray of coffee cups, listening to my successful children plot my life like I was already gone. The worst part? They genuinely believed they were helping. Their concern wasn't malicious, but it was suffocating. That night, alone in my too-quiet house, I made a decision that would change everything. If my children wanted to see how I'd handle a real financial crisis, I'd give them exactly that. But first, I needed to create one that didn't exist. The plan forming in my mind was deliciously simple, and what happened next would reveal truths about my family that I never saw coming. The next morning, I became a master forger. Well, that's probably giving myself too much credit. But I did spend 6 hours at my kitchen table, carefully doctoring bank statements and investment reports with the precision of a surgeon. My fake financial advisor was named Richard Blackstone. Even his name sounded like a scammer, right? I created email threads showing how he'd convinced me to move my money into high-yield international opportunities. The paper trail looked devastatingly real. Account balances dropping from millions to thousands. Transfer records showing money disappearing into offshore accounts. I even wrote myself desperate emails begging Richard to explain where my money had gone. The performance I gave at the family meeting 3 days later deserved an Oscar. I called Marcus, Diana, and Jake over on a Tuesday evening, made sure my hands were shaking just right when they walked in, had tissues strategically placed around the living room, even messed up my hair a little for effect. "I need to tell you all something," I began, my voice cracking perfectly on cue. "I've made a terrible mistake." The fake tears came easier than I expected. Maybe because underneath the performance, I really was heartbroken, just not about the money. Marcus leaned forward immediately, his banker instincts kicking in. "What kind of mistake, Mom?" I handed him the doctored documents with trembling fingers. "Richard Blackstone, my financial advisor. He's gone. And so is almost everything." Diana grabbed the papers next, her lawyer eyes scanning the numbers. I watched their faces carefully in those first unguarded seconds. Marcus went pale. Diana's jaw tightened. But their initial reactions weren't grief or concern for me. They looked angry, frustrated, like I'd personally ruined their vacation plans. Jake, sitting cross-legged on the floor like he used to as a kid, just looked confused. "Wait, what does this mean exactly?" "It means," I said, letting my voice break completely, "that your father's life insurance, our savings, the house equity I liquidated, nearly $4 million, gone." The silence that followed could have choked a horse. Then Marcus exploded. "How could you be so careless? Didn't you research this guy? Check his credentials." Diana was already on her phone, probably looking up asset recovery laws. "We need to file criminal charges immediately. Sue the firm. There might be insurance coverage. But Jake?" Jake scooted closer and put his paint-stained hand on my knee. "Mom, are you okay? Like, physically okay?" That small gesture almost broke my resolve right there. What happened over the next week revealed everything I needed to know about my children's true nature. Marcus called the very next morning, not to check on my emotional state, but to schedule an appointment with a geriatric psychiatrist. "We need to establish a timeline of your cognitive decline," he explained clinically. "For the legal proceedings." Cognitive decline. As if losing money automatically meant losing my mind. I started recording our conversations after that. The little digital recorder I'd bought to capture family stories became my secret weapon. What I heard made my skin crawl. "The financial disaster proves she can't handle complex decisions anymore," Marcus told Diana during a call I wasn't supposed to hear. "Dr. Martinez specializes in competency evaluations for elderly clients. If we can establish diminished capacity, we can get emergency conservatorship within 30 days. Diana's response chilled me to the bone. "I've already drafted the preliminary paperwork. We should move quickly before she makes any more catastrophic choices." They were using my fake crisis as ammunition to strip away my independence entirely. Meanwhile, something beautiful was happening with Jake. He showed up at my door Thursday evening with 2 grocery bags and a sleeping bag. "I cleared out half my studio," he announced, grinning like he'd won the lottery. "It's tiny, but we can make it work. I already talked to my landlord about adding you to the lease." I stared at him, genuinely speechless for the first time in days. "Jake, honey, you don't understand. I can barely afford groceries now. I can't contribute to rent or utilities or—" He waved me off like I was being ridiculous. "Mom, you raised 3 kids on Dad's teacher salary while working part-time at the library. You think I can't figure out how to take care of one awesome woman who happens to be temporarily broke?" The contrast was devastating. My successful children saw my crisis as their problem to solve through legal control. My struggling artist sons saw it as an opportunity to love me better. But the real revelation came when I discovered something that made my blood boil. Going through Marcus's briefcase while he met with the psychiatrist in my living room, I found documents dated 3 weeks before my fake financial disaster. Legal research about managing aging parents' assets, consultation notes with elder law attorneys, email threads discussing my obvious cognitive slippage and concerning financial decisions. They'd been planning this takeover before I ever mentioned Richard Blackstone. My fake poverty hadn't created their betrayal. It had simply accelerated their existing timeline. Diana confirmed my worst fears during a conversation she had with Marcus outside my front door. I heard every word through the window. "Honestly, the Blackstone thing might be a blessing in disguise," she said. her voice carrying that satisfied tone she got when closing difficult cases. Now we have concrete evidence of impaired judgment. The conservatorship hearing should be straightforward. Marcus agreed immediately. Dr. Martinez says the evaluation supports diminished capacity. We can have full financial control by next month. They were celebrating my supposed catastrophe like it was Christmas morning. That night, staying in Jake's cramped but warm studio apartment, I made my final decision. We shared Chinese takeout on his paint-splattered floor while he showed me his latest canvas, a portrait of an older woman with fierce, intelligent eyes. "Is that supposed to be me?" I asked. Jake grinned. "Before all this craziness started, you looked exactly like that, strong, unbreakable. I want to make sure I remember that version of you, no matter what happens next." His words hit me like lightning. My son saw strength where his siblings saw weakness. He saw potential where they saw problems. Most importantly, he saw me as fully human while they'd reduced me to a liability requiring management. The next morning, I called Diana and Marcus with my final performance. "I've decided to sign whatever papers you think are best," I told them, injecting defeat into my voice. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help making decisions." They scheduled the meeting for Friday afternoon. A lawyer's office downtown. Official signatures on official documents that would strip away my autonomy forever. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the morning preparing a very different kind of revelation. Friday afternoon arrived like Judgment Day. I sat in that polished conference room, watching Marcus arrange his briefcase with the satisfaction of a man who'd solved a difficult puzzle. Diana spread her conservatorship papers across the mahogany table like she was dealing cards for a game she'd already won. The lawyer they'd chosen, Mr. Henderson, looked exactly like central casting would order for sympathetic elder law attorney. Gray beard, kind eyes. Probably genuinely believed he was protecting a confused widow from her own poor judgment. "Mrs. Thompson," Henderson began gently, "your children have explained the situation with Mr. Blackstone and your recent financial difficulties. These documents will ensure you receive proper guidance for any future monetary decisions." I nodded weakly, playing my role perfectly. "I just don't want to be a burden on anyone." Marcus leaned forward with that concerned expression he'd perfected. "Mom, this is about protection, not burden. After what happened with the investment fraud, we need safeguards in place." Diana slid the papers closer to me. "The conservatorship is really just a formality. We'll handle the complicated stuff so you can focus on taking care of yourself." Taking care of myself. As if I were a houseplant that needed occasional watering. But here's where things got interesting. I reached into my purse and pulled out my own folder, much thicker than theirs. Before I sign anything, I have some documents of my own to share. The temperature in that room dropped about 20 degrees. First, I played the recordings. Marcus's voice filled the conference room, clinical and cold. "She's clearly lost her cognitive abilities." Then Diana discussing my obvious cognitive decline and their timeline for intervention. Henderson's eyebrows shot up toward his hairline. Next came the real kicker. The legal research they'd done weeks before my supposed financial disaster. Email threads about managing my assets. Consultation notes planning my mental competency evaluation. "Wait," Henderson interrupted, studying the dates. "These predate the investment fraud by 3 weeks." Marcus went pale. Diana started that thing lawyers do when they're caught off guard, talking very fast about context and misunderstandings. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out my actual bank statements, the real ones. Account balances showing every penny of my $4 million exactly where it should be. Investment portfolios untouched. The Richard Blackstone paper trail revealed as complete fiction. There was no financial advisor, I announced calmly. No investment fraud. No cognitive decline. Just 2 children who decided their mother was too stupid to manage her own inheritance. The silence could have suffocated a horse. Henderson looked like someone had just explained that gravity worked sideways. Marcus stared at the documents like they were written in hieroglyphics. Diana, she went into full damage control mode. "Mom, if you were competent enough to orchestrate this elaborate deception, then surely you understand why we were concerned about controlling my money," I finished sweetly. Because that's what this was really about. Not my well-being, not my happiness, my bank account. Then I told them about Jake, how he'd immediately offered his tiny apartment, how he'd talked to his landlord about adding me to the lease, how he'd seen my crisis as a chance to love me better, not an opportunity to take legal control. Your brother makes $12,000 a year selling paintings at farmers markets, I continued, watching their faces. But he was ready to take care of me without asking about insurance policies or asset protection. Marcus found his voice first. Mom, we were trying to help. You were trying to manage me like a liability. The beauty of the whole thing? They couldn't even be properly angry about my deception. How do you complain about being tricked when the trick exposed your own betrayal? Henderson cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting after everyone has time to process. But I had one final surprise that would reshape our family forever. Actually, I said, pulling out one more document. I've made some changes to my will. The room went dead silent. Jake will inherit the bulk of the estate, $3 million to be exact. I watched their faces turn white. Marcus and Diana, you'll each receive $200,000. Enough to show I don't hate you, but not enough to reward what you tried to do here today. Diana's lawyer brain kicked into overdrive. Mom, you can't make major financial decisions when you're emotionally compromised. Emotionally compromised, I laughed. Honey, I just orchestrated a months-long investigation that exposed your true motives. I recorded conversations, created fake documents, and caught you both red-handed trying to steal my independence. Does that sound mentally incompetent to you? Henderson was frantically taking notes. Marcus looked like he might throw up. But here's the interesting part, I continued. Jake doesn't know about any of this yet. When I told him I was broke, his first instinct wasn't to protect an inheritance. It was to protect me. The truth hit them like a freight train. While they'd been calculating asset protection strategies, their supposedly irresponsible brother had been clearing space in his studio apartment. Marcus finally found his voice. We were genuinely concerned about your welfare. Bull. I slammed my hand on that mahogany table. You had legal documents prepared before I ever mentioned losing money. You scheduled competency evaluations based on nothing but your own assumptions about my age. Diana tried one last legal maneuver. Even if your motives were to test us, the deception itself raises questions about judgment. The only judgment problem here is yours, I shot back. You judged your mother as incompetent without evidence. You judged your brother as worthless because he's not wealthy. You judged my crisis as your opportunity. Henderson cleared his throat. Mrs. Thompson, your cognitive abilities appear completely intact. These conservatorship papers are obviously unnecessary. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. Jake sees people's hearts, not their bank accounts. That's why he gets the money. That's why he gets my trust. Walking toward the door, I turned back one final time. Your father always said character reveals itself under pressure. Well, I applied some pressure. Jake's character shined like gold. Yours? Let's just say it needs some work. 6 months later, Jake used part of his inheritance to open a small gallery. He still lives modestly, still treats everyone with the same kindness. The money didn't change him. My test revealed everything I needed to know about unconditional love versus conditional control. Sometimes the best investment isn't financial. Sometimes it's discovering who really sees your worth.